So my wildcard is The Bridges of Madison County from 1995, starring Clint Eastwood, Meryl Streep, directed by Clint Eastwood, of course. Quick logline: photographer Robert Kincaid wanders into the life of housewife Francesca Johnson for 4 days in the 1960s. Yeah, this movie is a wildcard to me because of all the movies I've watched, and I've not watched all of his movies, but this kind of stands out as a true romance. But at the same time, there's just so much more depth to this movie in addition to just the romance part of it. And that's why this was my wild card. I also think I've seen Clint vulnerable, and Unforgiven definitely is
Hmm.
that. But there are moments in this movie, even though he's still very old, even in this movie, but him being so overwhelmed with emotion that he can't even look at Meryl Streep and has to turn away, or he's looking at her soaking wet, drenched in the rain with tears in his eyes. I've not seen him like that before. And it just moves me so much to see somebody who again we associate with being this sort of macho strong-willed kind of guy. And so it's a wild card in terms of subject matter, but also
Hmm.
just characterization. I had to put this. Yeah, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on before we get more into the movie. Had you watched this movie before?
I had sworn that I had. Like there was a period in like right after college when I said when I started like getting into Clint and I was like Netflix DVD by mail, a lot of his films. I thought I'd seen this before, and I definitely hadn't. So this was the first time I had seen it. I really liked this movie a lot. I thought the movie was great. And I think you're right in the sense that while Clint has in his movies as an actor always been a ladies' man. Like he's always betting women right and left in all these movies, even into his like 60s and 70s. What was that? The Mule, he has like a three-way or something, like a movie he made
Oh
like
my
4 years
gosh.
ago. Crazy. But in this movie, he's like a romantic. Like playing a romantic lead and he's so charming. Like I can easily see why Meryl Streep's character would fall for him. But getting back to like the themes of Clint, I think what's interesting about this movie is it does play again with the theme of these moral choices around adultery this time. And the judgment that there's bookends of this film are the Meryl
Mhm.
Streep's character has passed away and she left all of her diaries to her kids to go through and read. And basically, she's admitting to this affair she had years ago, very brief affair with Clint Eastwood over like a week, even though they stayed in contact for a while after that. And the kids are learning this like in real time, reading these diaries, and you see the different reactions between
Mhm.
the son and the daughter of first it's immediate judgment. Oh my God, I can't believe mom cheated on dad, and oh I hate her now, and then as they're reading, you sort of understand, or they understand more why she did it, why it actually was helpful for them because it made her into a better mother, and it sort
Mhm.
of gets into all those things. And by the end of the movie, while the movie's not like condoning adultery or saying you
Right.
should cheat on your spouse. It's like, look, people make decisions, and now you understand and have more empathy for why Meryl Streep made the decisions that she did, and Clint Eastwood going after someone who he knew was married, and why he made those decisions, and that you don't really judge them in the same way that anyone might by reading the facts, which is essentially what the kids see in the beginning of the movie when like, wait a second, what's going on? And then you go through that evolution, you have the empathy, you have the understanding, and then again, you're not condoning the decisions or saying they're right or wrong. You're just understanding Meryl Streep more as a person, which I think was fascinating and I think very interesting take on this, which is the theme that comes up in a lot of these types of movies. We've covered Brief Encounter before,
Right.
one of my favorite movies, also kind of about adultery. But this movie is handled in a way where it's more about the judgment and the morality of it than like Brief Encounter is more about the love aspect of it. So I thought this
Yeah.
movie was great. I really enjoyed it.
I mean, I could almost put this as a masterpiece. It was like a tough choice
Yeah.
between these two because this is sort of up there as well. I think when I first watched the movie, I wasn't in love with the kids because I was like, oh, why do we need this framing device? And these kids are kind of annoying and what have you. But I think as I watched it over time, I think it's important for the points that you brought up to have that. But to me, the movie is very much about the love. And I think just to bring back Brief Encounter to your point, like there are a few movies in that pantheon in my mind that have shown just so elegantly and naturalistically how two people can kind of fall in love with each other despite their circumstances and
Right.
anything and everything. Like it's not sensationalized that, oh, I'm this boring housewife, or I wanted more, or my husband is bad, or blah blah
Exactly.
blah. or I'm this kind of wandering person, and now I've seen somebody who, is interesting and what have you. It just feels just in those quieter moments, and you really see that. And I think the backstory of these two people is so critical in understanding that. And it's not, read to us. The characters just embody them and talk
Mhm.
about it, right? Like she did have other dreams. She comes from a different world. She's not from here. She's made a good life here, but it's coming to a point where the kids have grown up and there is a desire there. But then her system is kind of shocked a little bit by just like the way she asks him questions that, oh, you just found a town that looked pretty and you jump off the train. How could you do that?
Right.
But the truth is that that desire to live life is in her as well. And he reminds her of that, like, oh, you did do that because you moved from Italy to this
Right.
country.
Right.
You've done that actually. So, but you've just not seen that side of you for all this time because you've been building a home here.
I love when he says, when he's like, this is not boring. Like, what are you talking about? Like, look at your
Right,
life. You have an amazing life. And she's not,
right.
and he is able to show her that this is, and he's not just saying that to, he's trying to get with her or anything. It's not a
No,
pickup line. He's like, lady, like, I've been all around the world and like, you have something here. Like, I don't know why you can't see this, but let me kind of show it to you. And I think that the end of that conversation I really thought was cool. I
I
like that.
totally agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like this movie is so beautifully written. Like I can just listen to these two people like talk and explore, and they're questioning each other and themselves, right? And then later on, once the attraction starts to go deeper and they start to find common ground, and she gets to have some fun because she's not really had that. And I'm sure he's had fun, but I don't think he's had this kind of grounded fun with somebody, and have a home cooked meal. And all these things are attractive to both people. But then I love the morning after, where she really starts to question all of it. And it's so the more I've watched the movie, I think the questioning and the finger pointing that she's doing is actually at herself. So that's
Absolutely.
not
Why am
what
I doing
she's
this?
saying.
Right.
Why am I doing this? What she's talking about is, am I just another person in the many, many number of women that you met across the world? Is this even real?
Hmm.
And can it be even real? Oh, wait a minute. Is it real? Why am I doing it? And should I be doing it? Like, it's just such a layered dilemma that she's in. And obviously, I think this is in one of Meryl Streep's like pantheon performances. Like, this is like you can see her think through all of this real time, which I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, actually, like the part of the movie it kind of took me out of it a little bit was actually Meryl's accent just
Hmm.
did not work for me at all. Like the whole time, every time she was talking, I was trying to be like, what are you okay, you're Italian, but like is it vaguely foreign? And then by the end of the movie I'm like, okay, you're clearly trying to do an Italian person who was born in Italy with an Italian accent, now been to America for so long that
Right.
it's kind of still there but not really there. And
Exactly.
that well, I'm like, okay, that's very got some good truth to it, but for me like I couldn't, it was hard for me to get around that with her performance. I was too distracted. And maybe the second time I see the movie
Watch it again. I think
I'll
you'll
know kind
feel
of what it, but
differently.
it's like
Yeah.
just you should have made a choice to either have a very House of Gucci accent because at least then okay fine you're Italian, or just
No.
get rid of it entirely. Like something about this, I don't know, put a distance to me between myself and this character because the accent was like a little questionable. But beyond that, I think she again does a great job, and I really buy the two of them together and the dilemma that Clint Eastwood's character's in too, where it's like, look, you're married, so I can't, if I dedicate my whole like, heart to you, even though I think I'm falling in love, like you're just gonna smash it. I have no guarantees of this.
Right.
Like you're the one who can't do anything. Like I'd settle down right now and be with you for a second, but like I'm too scared to kind of go that far in because you have a escape hatch of like, well, look, I'm married, so this is over, And that
Yeah.
when that starts coming in the movie too, I really gotta empathize a lot with
It's
where Clint
another
Eastwood's
layer.
at too. It's like, oh, just because you're free doesn't mean you're free to like get your heart smashed by random women around town. So I think he that part, especially like you mentioned before, that scene of him in the rain is iconic and just so well handled. So yeah, I'm glad you put this on the list, and I think it fits in as Clint with as a director. Again, fits into a lot of these questions of morality and choices and everything that we've been talking about throughout all of his films. Even though this is a romance that seems a different genre, it is a different genre than a lot of the other movies we've talked about, and something that Clint doesn't do very often as an actor, even like a full on, this is a romantic movie. is it just shows how much of an artist he is because his worldview is still just like weaving into this. And maybe that's what attracted him to the book, which I've heard the book isn't very good and the movie actually makes the book better. I was reading some
I can
reviews
see
at the
that
time because
because
I
yeah,
hadn't like it was kind of like a trashy book that Clint was able
yeah.
to elevate into this more grander work. Unlike, I guess, the reviews of the Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, where they say they did the book disjustice, but just
Mm.
interesting that he was attracted to this, and maybe that's why, because of these choices we were talking about and the effects that these choices have, which you might say, oh, it was terrible she had this affair, but kids through that lens, it helps them. Like the daughter is like, you know what, I have to leave the marriage that it actually isn't working. I can now have a divorce. And the son has sort of taken his wife for granted. And now he comes back and it's kind of a little cheap. Those actors are pretty bad, to be honest.
They're
I
not good.
liked the framing, but the actors were not great. He comes back, he like kisses her really hard. It's like, I love you. I want to be the best husband. And it's like, well, that's because of a bad decision. You can say morally incorrect of cheating on her husband. But Meryl Streep saying this and actually letting the truth happen is making her kids' lives better, which I thought was a good sort of again reflective. Even though the choice might be bad, you could argue the consequences of that aren't necessarily bad.
And you understand it, right? And this is the thing, like Clint is still doing this, which is that he allows the story and the characters to breathe. There are no jump cuts. You
Right.
stay with them, and what that does is, of course, things can be slower, but it allows you to kind of really understand why people are making the choices, good or bad, and the consequences of those, And I mean, the scene in the car where she's almost about to leave is iconic.
Hmm.
No words are said in that scene, and I'm sure when that movie first came out, people must have been yelling in the
Yeah.
theater, "You gotta go, you gotta go!" but
Yeah.
but I think, yeah, and there's maybe that's what the pulpiness of the book might be, but the way the movie has handled it, the way Clint has handled, and the way these two leads have performed, like you are at the edge of your seat, not because will she, won't she, but the what's at stake
Right.
emotionally for these people. And
Mhm.
it's critical that the husband is a good guy. He's not a bad guy, and
Right.
you see that's what at stake. And
Hmm.
so yeah, it can be sensationalized, but the movie is just very delicate. Again, sense of place. Like I really felt like I've never been to this part of the country, but I felt like I was there.
Hmm.
And these bridges are beautiful. The heat, the sand, the farm that she lives on, like all of that just feels so real. Her house, her kitchen, all of that feels just so real and tactile. Like this is some of the best production design I've seen in
Yeah.
any movie, let alone a Clint movie.
Yeah, and real because it's very ordinary and not
Yeah,
nice, not glamorized. And there's
no,
scenes where he goes in, he's like in these cafes, and there's just the townspeople. They look
I
like
love
real
those.
people. It's not
Yeah,
like, oh, from central casting, let's staff a waitress and the person behind. It's like, no, these look like you're actually in this town. And
yeah.
it's that again is something that he does so well. But definitely in this movie, I was
So
realized, oh yeah, like I feel like I'm there. Definitely transported
yeah.
for sure.
And I will say, in addition to the romance and vulnerability part that we've talked about, I think this movie is very sensual. First of all, the way Meryl is shot in the movie, I mean, she's in her 40s, but she looks so good, not
Hmm.
like glamorized or anything, like a simple person, a woman of middle age, but it's just beautiful, but a hardy woman. Like you see her, like she's jumping off of tractors, cutting the corn in her field and does all the work and but also is sensual and sexy and is kind of coming into her own sexuality. Like he gives a lot of time to that. Like it's not for vanity purposes because she wouldn't do that, but she is kind of put aside her own desire and sexuality on the side.
Right.
And this whole thing is kind of brought that to life. Like she wants to buy a good dress, she wants to take a good bath, and these letters or the diary entries are kind of explicit, and
Yeah.
kind of a vulnerable thing to be writing in the first place, let alone to your own children. And none of
Yeah.
that is like handled lightly, right? Like
Right.
it's handled with a lot of depth and nuance, which I love. And she looks amazing. Their chemistry, I mean, Meryl can have chemistry with the lamppost, but their chemistry is amazing, even though he's so old
Yeah.
looking in the movie,
Yeah.
so old.
Yeah, I
I
know.
always forget that because by the end of the movie, I'm, swooned by their romance. But then when I watch it again, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so old in this
Yeah,
movie,
but
Tula.
that was
But
30 years ago too. That's great. When I saw him in this, I was like, damn, you're old, but oh my God, like he had a movie again 4 years ago. He's having a three-way in that movie. But like at this point, he was too old. Like it just,
Yeah,
but that's Clint, you know,
it's evergreen. What a guy.
did the best. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.